I was reading this about and after what Elijah just got through saying, um, creating the color line and confronting Jim Crow civil rights in Middle America, 1850 to 1990, and this is a dissertation by a PhD student. This dissertation examines the creation of the color line and the ways that African American communities confronted it throughout Kansas, Iowa, and Nebraska. A detailed search of school board minutes, newspapers, court records, manuscripts, census data, and other archival sources in over 20 Midwestern cities and rural communities reveals the existence of mass meetings, boycotts, and legal challenges throughout the 19th century. As a result, this work challenged the historiography of post-Reconstruction America as an era of accommodation to Jim Crow. This survey also demonstrates that the racial assumptions of Midwestern whites vary little from their Southern contemporaries, yet demographic factors and the activism of black communities limited the creation of the color line in Middle America. Is that or is that not true? This was put on, this is in the library in Lawrence, Kansas. So there's just something to think about there when we talk about color. Also, something to think about too is we all know that black is not a ethnicity. And in order to be able to qualify for the acres and acres and acres of land that was that will soon go back to those whom it was stolen from. You have to be able to relate, as far as the ethnicity is concerned, to the information in the land grant, the land grant. And when it talks to about this tribe and that tribe and that tribe and that tribe, so we as a quote unquote melanated nation, we really need to find out who we are, because black is not a nation, ethnicity. Black is not a tribe. Black is not a nation. And if we don't find out who we are, we're not going to be able to get everything back that our ancestors has purchased with their blood, sweat, and tears for us, so that we can be catapulted forward in this in this day and time. So please, let's remember to do that as well. What else did you want to talk about when it comes to what you feel is one of the most important things that we as a people need to know in this day and age, according to what's happening right now, specifically right now?
It goes right now. The health.
And can you talk about what happened with the Gorbachev? He has it figured out. When all this started, I don't know if we talked about this the other day, but all this started when the New World Order, if you believe it's a conspiracy theory, if you believe it's, but Mr. Elijah Ali has a very interesting concept as to when the downplay, when good became bad and bad became good.
Even the issues that brought up today, it talks about the difference in the economic stratas. What we call is called the New World Order. The New World Order.
Oh, we were talking about the Illuminati earlier. Okay.
The New World Order, which is my first understanding of it, came through a document called the Protocols of the Lost Elders of Zion, which were the Hebraic, not the Hebraic, but the Zionist Jews, after taking over the Jewish religion after the Holocaust, who were able to pay themselves reparations because they had all the money to start off with, began to lay foundational structures in America, mostly due through print media, writings and those kinds of things. Having the wealth and having the ability to control the literary world, all the publishings, paper, all those kinds of things, the Lost Elders of Zion document identifies a methodology of eventually controlling the world. And that control factor was to begin through a concept called New World Order. That went into effect in 1980 when, at that time, President Reagan met with, at that time, the president of Russia, Gorbachev. Prior to the 80s, going back from 70 on, Russia had always been utilized by the press in America as being a communist country, which also made it an atheist country, a non-believer in God, which was the foundation for American people not to necessarily like Russia. Some of you might be able to go back to the latter part of the 60s when Russia was able to collaborate with Cuba. America was very afraid of that because that would allow for them to have missiles and those kinds of things right at our footstool. And homes were almost mandated to build bomb shelters and all those kinds of things to protect themselves in case Russia, being in Cuba, a communist country working in Cuba, was detrimental. That all played out later on, and found out that it had nothing to do with anything, that Cuba maintained its independence. They just were able to get from Russia some things that they wanted to get to help get done what they need to get done and go on about their business. So that communist ideology and atheist in that ideology, when Gorbachev met with Ayatollah Khomeini, when Reagan met with Gorbachev, the Ayatollah Khomeini stated, who was the head of Iran at that time, that no longer could the eastern countries, Iran, do any kind of business with America or Russia because they were both the same as Babylon. They were devilish countries. That's the same thing as talking about the New World Order. That piece has been implemented and put into place.
When?
Its first real manifestation is at this present time, where the economic structure has actually begun to put its own powers into work and controlling law and order.
When was it put in place, you said?
It's always been in place. It has manifested itself in this bacteria thing that we're going through right now.
COVID-19, yes.
Yeah. This is the first real obvious mandating of it. The incidence is like with the bombing of Japan. That was done based upon European countries fighting Japan, and because of the culture of the Japanese people, they were losing the war. One of the main issues that they did not expect to happen that caused serious problems for Europe, all the other European nations against Japan, was the kamikaze concept. The spirit of the Japanese people, because they are a universal people, they were willing to die for the sake of saving their land and their people. So they would take planes and load the planes with missiles, and instead of shooting the missiles from the air to the ships coming across the water, they would actually fly the planes into the ship, which would cause for the ships to sink instantaneously. I mean, it was just like, you couldn't get a better shot unless you were guiding the bullet yourself. Okay. And that kamikaze attacking was something that the European countries just could not deal with. So that's why they dropped the atom bomb on Japan, which would cause for Japan to surrender instantaneously.
So, what do you think about what's going on right now with Trump trying to get not only China but also Japan and Iran to give up their nuclear weapons?
Well, that's why they want to do that, because those are the entities. Japan has been quiet ever since that. China stays in the they're always talking about the relationship between China and today. Iran speaks for itself. They also have the capabilities of doing nuclear weapons now. The United States, the Zionists or basic Europeans that have ruling, the poorer Europeans aren't aware as they should be of the movement of the wealthy. They're experiencing that now. The monetary gain takes precedence over ethnicity. Before there were black slaves, there were indentured servants, which were poor whites. One of the reasons why the concept of poor white trash is so demeaning is because they were perceived as being worse, the same, if not worse, than the African American, the slaves, because they were victims also of tyranny because they were poor. So the first slaves that came to this country were indentured servants, which were white, poor whites. The difficulty lied is that all they had to do was jump off the ship before it got to shore. And because of their hue, their color, they would mingle into whatever they needed to mingle into. So that became a non-profitable venture, because all they had to do was just, get off the shackles or do whatever they had to do and mingle in, and they were lost.
Also, keep in mind, they also had the protection of the church back then, the Catholic Church, because indentured servants, quote, end quote, they were protected. They could marry. They were not in servitude for the rest of their life. They were not to be abused verbally and physically and emotionally and mentally. And they did have the protection of the church. If somebody was trying to take away their rights, the church would stand up for them and fight for them. And so that is what the church took away from melanated people when we were brought here as prisoners of war and made into chattel slaves. They took away that protection of the church, which they say that we're less than humans. It made that real, and every religion turned their back on us, I think, except the Amish. Let me find that, but I believe so.
The whole concept of Christianism comes out of not Europe, but Rome and Italy. That whole doctrination, which was put into effect by Constantine in 325, that was a very strong separating mechanism. The only place that they weren't able to dominate was Moorish area, and that's because they weren't equipped, because of their ethnicity, to travel the desert, particularly without any kind of guide. And the only ones that traveled the desert were the Moors. That's why the Quran was established in 425, 100 years later, because the population needed to have some leadership, because at that time even the Muslim population, the Moorish people, were still doing some things that got kind of out of line. They were killing their female babies before the male baby. If you didn't have a male child, they would kill the female child so that the population wouldn't overdo towards females, because it was causing issues as far as their way of life and their economics were concerned. And that's one of the things that the Prophet Muhammad was able to alter and stop that through the revelation of Quranic understanding that he was able to present. and that's why he's held in the prophet status that he is. But that all is still does not alter or has not affected the Zionist Eurocentric domination of the world, and that's one of the reasons why they stay after Iran, because of that same split and that same consciousness.
That's very true. I when I had looked at my show, I was like, I want to have a show where we not only are we talking, but we also walking, and that's why I have brought up men like Brother Delvino, Wilson Debriano, Dr. Chika Kua, and gentlemen like that, because they're actually, setting up schools and systems that are separate from other cultures, and so that our people can know who we are, we can know who our culture, my people, they can know who we are, we know our culture, and we can be helped by our own self, because we are who we've been looking for. Why don't you think more people are setting up economic basis for us to be able to operate from? Do you think they're scared of another Black Wall Street?
Well, the Black Wall Street, what it did is that it sent out a very loud signal. Those the two main cities that were identified. There were a bunch of small. Even Omaha was a tremendous metropolis. It's never identified as the Black Wall Street, but it was a tremendous metropolis of its own. The railroads, by the railroads having to come through Omaha as opposed to Kansas City, made it a haven for artists, because artists would come here to switch off to go to Kansas and further down into St. Louis.
Okay, is that where we had a lot of people don't like the term Chitlin Circuit is concerned? Is that where?
Well,
it's not. What is that?
The Chitlin Circuit
that
was.
Why people do like it? Why they don't like it? What exactly?
The Chitlin Circuit is because of the segregation, where entertainers would go to certain towns and perform at certain clubs.
Okay, we're gonna go ahead on, and we're gonna cut right here, and then we're gonna start up again. I want to thank you so much. We have Mr. Elijah Ali, and we're talking about Omaha back in the Chitlin Circuit days. What in the world is that? So that's where we're gonna start at when you see us again. Peace, power, blessings, and prosperity. Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Hi, welcome to Leaders in Purpose. I want to thank you so much for being here. Right now we're talking to Mr. Elijah Ali about the Chitlin Circuit. What is the Chitlin Circuit here in Omaha, Nebraska? Before we get started, we do want to thank you for being here. Thank everyone here who's working here at the KPAO, and also we want to thank our ancestors for being here and for everything that's good, and that the answer to everything, to me, if you can't do it in peace, honey, don't do it at all. Okay, Mr. Elijah Ali, when we last ended, we were talking about, we talked about quite a few things. Gorbachev and the beginning of the New Order. We also talked about Nebraska and how it was has its racist moments, but also when it had its high times too. It has its poor times, its racist times, but it also has high times. And it was called what you call the Chitlin Circuit times. Exactly what is the Chitlin Circuit? Why don't some people like the word, some people don't? And what is a Chitlin Circuit?
Okay. Well, the term Chitlin comes from one of the main, they call it delicacy, but to take the gut of a pig, which is the foulest of most all animals, and make that a gourmet dish is a cultural extravaganza. That's chitlins are synonymous with descendants of slaves. You were held with a certain air of prestige, mostly on Thanksgiving, on holidays, Thanksgiving, going into the Christmas holidays, on having chitlins, and to cook chitlins is an almost an unrecognized art. That's taking the gut of a chitlin, turning it inside out, scraping all the bowel movement and all the tissue and everything, and then seasoning it to the point where it's delicious for somebody to eat. Equate that to the human. It's like taking an individual and taking the bottom part of their digestive system, going into the rectum, taking it out and cleaning it and eating it. That's and the pig is the filthiest of all animals. So the chitlin circuit was a route that entertainers used to promote themselves. Because of the segregation, there were only certain clubs that they could play at. And so they went to those clubs and they would perform, and then they would go to the next club, and they would go to the next club. And after a while, it became such a pattern that people would plan on being in certain cities at certain times, knowing that certain artists were going to be there. So it made these particular clubs, these particular cities, almost vacation spots for black people. And Omaha was
so it's not like they took something negative and made it positive.
Yes. Omaha, because the railroad came here, and it would let them off, and the majority of them would either go from here to Denver or go from here to Kansas City. The majority at that time were going from here to Kansas City to St. Louis. Then they could deal in that area, Oklahoma and all that area themselves. But if they went further into the South, the transportation system really changed. It was easier for them to go from the East Coast into places like Georgia and Florida than to come all the way to Nebraska. So they would probably go from here maybe to St. Louis and maybe as far as Oklahoma City or Tulsa or some places like that. So that whole little realm between Kansas, Oklahoma, and the edges of Texas, Nebraska, Kansas, Oklahoma, and the edges of Texas were hot spots for entertainment, and developed. St. Louis was developed off of the mingling of the music from Nebraska, Kansas, and then the music from Texas and Georgia. And after a period of time, that whole routing system became known as the Chitlin Circuit. It also was the mechanism that first started the distribution of music, because you didn't have, they wouldn't distribute our music. We had to distribute. Oh, because it was, they would take all the money like they do now. That's it was only until the latter part of the 70s, going into the 80s, going to the pop era of the 80s, did we come anywhere close with the advent of rap, hip hop. First of all, not hip hop. First of all, it was the breakdancing. Then the breakdancing took us to hip hop, rap, and then hip hop. That was an era where they redid the Chitlin Circus, because the hip hop musicians realized that they weren't going to get the kind of money for what they were doing. They were doing the engineering, because it was mostly technology now, writing the music, producing the music, engineering the music, and still they would get less than 40%. If you made 40% of the money because of the distribution of whites had all the distribution rails, you were lucky. Only a few artists. One of the main artists was excellent. That was Gladys Knight. She's one. They kind of kept. She kind of led the guidelines for that because she refused to have her music distributed by anybody else. So she began to distribute her own music, and they would travel and take music with them and take them to the record shops there themselves. But that really helped in the chitlin circuit realm because by the time the music was being produced, they also took their music with us and sold their music. It was only till later on years that we even learned that we should probably buy these jukeboxes ourselves because after we would bring the music in, the clubs would buy jukeboxes, then people would go and listen to the music on jukeboxes, and less than 15%. In most cases, it was like 10%. Whoever had the jukebox in the store or in the shop, they may get a dime on the dollar.
Are we finally coming together and say we need to build our own? Are we finally coming to do what the other races are doing? Most other races, the Chinese, they take care of their own. The Europeans take care of their own. The Asians take care of their own. Everybody takes care of their own but us. Are we finally step and say, let's take care of us first? So when we come to the table, we can come with our heads held high with something to we can come to the table with our heads up, something to deal with. So we want to thank everybody for being here, and welcome to Leaders in Purpose.